I feel like now's quite a good time based on some of the videos that I made about growing up in a dysfunctional family environment and how we all grow up to some degree in varying levels of dysfunction, right? It happens. It's kind of almost part of the human experience whenever particularly an adult within a family system is trying to run away from or hide from an emotion or protect everybody from it. What tends to happen is everybody kind of knows at some level, almost subconsciously, that something's going on, but nobody's talking about it, so nobody can comprehend it. It kind of leads on to another conversation about childhood wounding or childhood trauma or adversity that we faced when we were younger. So often I hear people talk about not having any trauma in my life. I didn't have a traumatic childhood. I had a perfect life. I had the perfect childhood. It's nothing to do with trauma and all that kind of stuff. And actually, what that points to is a slight misunderstanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about trauma. Trauma coming from the Greek word meaning wound, right? We're actually talking about an internal wound here. There needs to be more understanding that some of the deepest wounds that we experience as children are actually to do with not being able to comprehend our experience, right? So if you take the child of an alcoholic, for example, it's not necessarily the traumatic things that they see that causes the problems. They are traumatic, but they're not what caused the problem. The problem is no emotionally available adult to help them to comprehend their experiences. That's where the real wounding happens. So you start to realize that you could get wounding, you could experience quote unquote trauma growing up in a family where simply a parent wasn't able to comprehend the emotions that you were struggling with. If you had a high level of sensitivity and the parent you grew up with a parent that couldn't match that depth of sensitivity for whatever reason, their own wounding, right, their own inability to go towards those emotions, or perhaps literally just not a genetic level of sensitivity, then they wouldn't have been able to help you comprehend certain emotions, and so your body would have found a way to deal with them. And so what we're talking about is much less about the things that happen to us, and we're talking about the things that happened inside of us as a result of the things that happened to us, and the way that we try to comprehend our experiences. You don't need these big traumatic events, okay? You don't need to take your life and compare it to somebody who's had deep levels of trauma and then question your own wounding, right? Much like you couldn't get to adulthood without some kind of, at least a physical graze, some kind of physical trauma, even if it's the worst thing you got until you were 18 was a small cut, right? There's no way you can make it to 18 without some kind of internal wounding, right? Now, if we take that small physical cut that I'm talking about, it could be a very small cut that happened when you were 2 years old, but was just completely left and kept flaring up and getting infected and just got worse and worse and remained there, right? The same can be true with our internal wounding, right? And we're all different in our levels of sensitivity and our ability to kind of show up to our healing, right? And that's not on anybody, that's just the reality of different human beings and showing up to the human experience in a different way. So when people say that, I don't have any trauma, that doesn't make any sense, okay? We all have a level of wounding. And it's about finding out the ways in which we've showed up to that in our lives and how we've attempted to comprehend that. When we start to work that out, that's when we start to get and move towards what we would call healing.